Welcome, everybody, to the Thursday evening edition of Freedom Link Radio on March the 1st, 2012. Tonight, boy, we've got a good couple of guests lined up. First hour, Alfred Adask is on the show, and hour number two, our good friend Chuck Smith joins the broadcast. So we've got a lot of good radio ahead over the next couple of hours. Let's bring in Alfred here. Alfred is, he's been jailed 344 days in a level 5 maximum security jail and never got charged with a crime. I mean, that right there, I think that's good enough for one of those Boy Scout pins. We also have the fact that he was sued for $25,000 per day. I know I couldn't afford anything like that, especially when it adds up to like $9 million a year. He's just an absolutely brilliant fellow. His website or blog is adask.wordpress.com. And I'm so glad to have him on the show. Welcome, Alfred.
Hello, Joe. I'll give you one correction. I'm not an absolutely brilliant fellow, I can tell you that. You hear about the high notes. You know, the low notes are mercifully concealed.
Well, it's good to have you here nonetheless. Alfred, can you talk a little bit about why you were jailed for 344 days in a level 5 maximum security jail?
I was arrested. Now, this is a bizarre story. I was arrested on the allegations of 2 felony counts of non-support of a child. Each one of them stood to keep me in the slammer. Each one had a potential sentence of 5 years. Now, this was based on a claim by a woman I hadn't been married to. All right? It was concocted between her and her attorney. She had worked for me. And I may be the father of the child. But she left. All right? But I don't know, 6 months after the child was born, and she subsequently moved to another state. And 5 years later, she filed charges against me, alleging that we had been married, and she had to do it because she had a two-year window of opportunity if we weren't married. And she waited until 5 years, and she filed the charges, and she had to allege that we had been married in order to have a basis to get in and sue for child support. Well, wow. So I wound up, she made the allegations, and I understood that this was fraudulent, and I waived extradition to go to Missouri. In fact, what happened is 2 police officers came to my home, and I had a guy working for me. Mm-hmm. First thing they did, they entered the house without warrant. They arrested my employee. All right? They thought he was me. They arrested him. I came out of the back. They see me, and all of a sudden people begin to realize, we got the wrong guy. They never had a warrant. They didn't have a warrant for my arrest. They took me down to Loose Sterrett. They kept me there for something like, I don't know, close to 3 weeks, somewhere along those lines. Loose Sterrett is the Dallas County Jail. That's not fun. And I was told that they could keep me for 180 days based on this false charge.
Wow.
It was false. So I waived extradition to go to Missouri. I thought these people in Dallas are crazy. Arresting people without warrants, keeping them for 180 days is crazy. I waived extradition to go to Missouri, and I thought, well, the people in Missouri, they can't be as crazy as the people in Dallas. I got there. They were worse. They were worse yet. All right? And but one thing led to another, and I qualified my signature on the waiver of extradition. I agreed to extradition on condition that above my signature, I wrote at arm's length. And below my signature, in fact, I didn't want to sign because everything on the document was in the all uppercase name, or all uppercase letters, including my name. And I was complaining to the extradition officer that I didn't feel comfortable signing that because that wasn't my true name. And we did that dance a couple of times. And finally he said, look, I tell you what, I'll write under your signature, I'll write true name, Alfred Adask, capitalized, and then also known as Alfred N. Adask, all uppercase. Now, I didn't think of that myself, but as soon as he wrote it, I thought, my God, that's brilliant. That was on the waiver of extradition. It was signed by the judge and sealed by the court clerk. It was the terms of the deal under which I went to Missouri. All right?
Wow.
Missouri picked me up, and they hauled me up there. And they didn't understand what they were getting into until I arrived. And I think at that point they saw, oh, my God, they had taken me in a non-fiduciary capacity. They had agreed to extradite me from Texas to Missouri at arm's length, meaning I was not acting in a fiduciary capacity. My understanding of child support is it's a fiduciary obligation. I signed, and they agreed to accept me in a non-fiduciary capacity. They didn't understand what they were doing, but they did. They didn't get it till I got there. Said, we can't go anywhere. They held me for 344 days because they didn't have brains enough to know how to prosecute me, and I didn't have brains enough to know how to get out.
Wow.
So we had kind of a Mexican standoff between a couple of idiots. They didn't know how to get me, and I didn't know how to get out, so there I was. But they held me for 344 days. I came out. I was reduced pretty much to the status of homelessness. It's something that is just almost astonishingly cruel in some regards. They turned me loose on the last day. They brought me over to the courthouse. I was supposed to have finally a probable cause hearing. You understand? I'd been there 11 months.
Right.
And now they're going to give me a probable cause hearing. I should have had it in a couple of days. They're going to give it to me. They're going to give me a probable cause hearing. They send in a public defender, and he says he's my attorney. I said, no, you're not. And he says, yeah, I'm your public attorney. We get into a shouting contest. I'm cussing at him. I say, you are not my freaking attorney. And we're shouting back and forth. Guards come to the cell. They think there's going to be a brawl. I can't hurt anyone. I am shackled hand and foot. You understand?
Mm-hmm.
I can barely, I can't even pick my nose if that's what I want to do. I tell him I'm not taking him for the attorney. He goes away, and I'm saying, I'm going to sue you for malpractice. And he says, I'm not afraid of you. You're not going to sue anybody. He comes back, and he says, the judge has agreed. He says, we got a problem. He says, we can't find the paperwork for the proceeding. Prosecutor doesn't have the paperwork. And I said, well, I got a copy right here. You can use mine. He says, no. We can't use yours. All right? I knew this was bunk. I knew when he came back, I knew he was just feeding me some crap. But he said, the judge has said, we will turn you loose right now. You can go on home. We will free you. You don't have to sign a bond or anything. You don't have to pay anything for a bond. Just personal recognizance, and you're out of here.
Wow.
I said, I can't sign a bond on this thing because I've seen your bonds, and they include fine print at the bottom where you admit if you take the bond that you have just admitted that the court has jurisdiction in this matter, and you're subject to that jurisdiction. I said, I'm not going to concede jurisdiction. I'm not taking a bond. He says, no, this is a special bond. I go to see the judge, and he's going to draw up a special bond just for you. I said, well, you show it to me, bring it back. And he says, well, first you got to sign this memorandum with me. I said, no. I'm not taking you as my attorney. If I sign that memorandum, you're my lawyer. I don't want you for a lawyer. I'm going to do my own talking when I get to court. He leaves. Oh, and while he was there, he says, Mr. Adask, do you understand? What did he say? I can't remember exactly. It's been so many years now. This goes back to 2002.
Mm-hmm.
So it's 10 years ago. But he says, Mr. Adask, he suggests that I need mental health care. All right? Because I'm making arguments that he's not familiar with. And he thinks I'm just out of my mind.
I think I'll tell you what. You sound like your head's pretty screwed on straight, but when we come back, I want to find out the rest of the story and also get into some other court dealings you had dealing with the FDA and the state of Texas. So don't go away, folks. We'll be right back after these messages. You're listening to Freedom Link Radio on the Orion Talk Radio Network. Welcome back, folks. Don't forget the email address is thefreedomlink@centurylink.net. That's thefreedomlink@centurylink.net. We're joined by Alfred Adask. That's adask.wordpress.com. And, boy, I'll tell you, 344 days in a level 5 slammer like that I could think of many other things that I would rather do.
I can tell you that it was one of the great blessings of my life. I walked into that slam. I walked into that jail, and I knew from the beginning. I knew from the time the cops were there, good Lord was pulling me out. Mm-hmm. All right. I didn't think And when I shipped me up to Missouri, I thought, well, we'll go up there and we'll get this straightened out. I thought I'd be back within a week or 10 days. All right. I had no idea I was going to be there for most of a year. That never crossed my mind. But I knew from the beginning this was the good Lord's business. He put me in that prison or that jail, and I didn't particularly mind being there so long as I believed the good Lord had put me there. It was the sort of thing where I started out with what I thought was a pretty strong sense of faith when I was arrested. And by the time I got out of that jail 344 days later, I would say subjectively my faith was 2 or 3 times stronger than it was at the beginning.
Why would you say that?
You just get into a much stronger connection with the good Lord. Things happen where you begin to understand the good Lord is there. You have a much more intense, I've said for years, if I ever lose my sense that the good Lord is immediately present in my life, if it just gets to where all of a sudden I feel a sense of isolation and as if I don't have any awareness of the presence of the good Lord, I will fight my way back into that jail. I'll go back up to Missouri and I don't care. I'll crash the walls with a truck or something like that to try to get back into it. I really learned a lot. It was a sort of thing where information came to me, and it was almost as if I was going from class 101 to 102 to 103 to 201 to 202. And every couple of days, I had more material. People would send me things from around the country, and it all seemed to build. Whatever I had last couple of days ago, the next package would almost certainly build on what I had seen previously. I had no idea.
And there was no coordination.
How much I would gain out of being in that damn slammer. I don't want to go back. All right, don't misunderstand. I don't want to go back. It wasn't like it was fun. And I would hope that the good Lord doesn't send me back. But if He does, that's what the good Lord wants. I'm ready to go.
Right, and that's fantastic. But would you say that? That there was absolutely no coordination as far as on your part? As far as what people were sending you, it was something.
No. Yeah. People were sending me things that I didn't even know these people. All right, and they were sending me things. They heard about me being in the slammer, and people were sending me packages of information.
Wow.
And you've got all day there to read and write. You got to write with these little golf pencils. They give you these little pencils that are only about 2.5 inches long. You sit there and you're trying to write with a pencil on pieces of paper and so on, and keep track of whatever you're doing and try to reason your way through things. But regardless, in the end, it was a great blessing. I learned an enormous amount. I don't want to go through it again. That's a fact. But it wasn't just pain and antagonism or whatever. It was. I'm a better man for having done that. And I don't recommend it to other people, but I know in my case that was the truth.
And so now after that, you got involved with the colloidal silver. Is that right? In
fact, it was part of the reason why I never sued these guys for false imprisonment, which I absolutely should have done, and it's shameful that it didn't take place. But I got out. And I was preparing to sue these guys I was doing my research, and I had 2 years to get lined up to sue these guys with a Title 42 suit was what I was working on. And we're coming up on the 2-year mark, and the cops come to the house where I'm living in Dallas again and try to arrest me 2 more times to go back. I never thought they'd call me back up into Missouri. I never thought they'd try to get me another time. But they did. They came back after about 18 months or so, 15, 18 months. They came back again, tried to take another shot at me. They didn't get me. They came to the door, but the first time I wouldn't step outside the door, and they wouldn't reach in to grab me. They didn't have a warrant. I asked to see a warrant. They said, come on out and we'll show it to you, and I know better than that. I'm not going to do it. Second time they came, I don't know, it was like 5 a.m. in the morning, beat the hell out of the door. I thought they were charging through the door. I'm back in my bedroom trying to get some decent clothes on. All right, so if I have to make my way back from Missouri to Texas, I'll at least have some halfway decent traveling clothes. That was one of the, they pick you up and they haul you away, something like 800 miles away from my home. They haul you up there, and when they released me without a dime in my pocket.
Oh, my goodness.
Just gone. Go home. There you are. And I had 2 bags. Somebody had given me a couple of laundry bags. I had 2 bags full of papers and books that I'd had while I was up there. Probably had 100 pounds worth of paper and books. And I was somehow supposed to make my way from Jefferson County, Missouri, back to Dallas, Texas, hitchhiking or whatever. Turned out 2 people came down to the last hearing that they had there, the probable cause hearing, and they waited. And when I got out, they were there, and they said, well, we can give you a ride. And then one guy, he let me stay at his house there for, 10 days or so. And then by the time I was there for 10 days or so, other people had made some contributions. There was enough money where I could get a bus ticket back to Dallas and blah, blah, blah. But the idea of trying to make your way 700 miles without a dime in your pocket, all right, that's just absolutely, it is.
It's got to be sobering.
It's an abomination. It's not just sobering. It is disgusting. It is abhorrent. It's the sort of thing where you say, my God, what the hell are you doing? And this Jefferson County at the time was recognized as one of, if not the most corrupt county in Missouri. They routinely arrested people, extradite them. They had a guy up there from Florida. They'd extradite, bring him in from other states.
Really?
And they found a way to make money off the deal. And I think what it was is I think it would cost them several $1,000s to extradite someone. But when they did, they would pass the bill on to the state. And I think they'd pad the bill. If it cost them $5,000 to extradite me, they'd send a bill for $10,000 to the state. I'm only guesstimating. I don't know the numbers. And I think the state didn't mind because I think they turned around and sent the bill for $15,000 or $20,000 to the federal government. Now, I don't have evidence to support that, but that's my suspicion. They can't have been doing this because there was one guy up there came from Florida. He had allegedly bounced a check for something like $20. And they had him extradited from Florida all the way up to Missouri over a $20 check. They had a black guy I met down there. He was from Cleveland, Ohio. He had been charged with something, bouncing checks, fraud, one thing and another. But the FBI had cleared him. They said this is a case of identity theft. Somebody had stolen his wallet and the rest of his stuff and was using it in Missouri. This wasn't the guy. The FBI had notified Jefferson County, and Jefferson County said, we'll take our chances. So they hauled this black guy. When they know he's not guilty, they hauled him in from Cleveland to Missouri. I mean, it was a racket. It was a strange situation. We were talking, though, before we took the break. The public defender wanted to be my attorney, and I knew if I accepted him as my attorney, I would concede the court's jurisdiction, and I wasn't about to do that. We're arguing, and I'm making patriot arguments to him. And he's a relatively young guy, out of law school, a few years, I don't know how long. And he thinks the patriot arguments are just crazy. And he says, Mr. Adask, and at one point, he thinks the arguments are crazy. And I said, do you understand that I ran for the Supreme Court of the state of Texas back in 1992? And he looks at me and he just rolls his eyes. He thinks I'm out of my mind. Right? And I did run for the Supreme Court of the state of Texas, which is supposed to be illegal. But I got on the ballot, and I won. I had 201,000 votes in 1992. He thinks I'm just crazy, and he rolls his eyes. Mr. Adask, if I show you that you haven't run for...
Folks, don't forget, every Wednesday and Friday from 10 p.m. to 12 a.m. Eastern is Down the Rabbit Hole with Popeye here on the Orion Talk Radio Network. So tune in and listen in to Popeye. It goes over the latest and greatest news, as well as has some very hard-hitting guests. That's Down the Rabbit Hole with Popeye on the Orion Talk Radio Network. So, Alfred, you had 201,000 votes trying to get on the Texas Supreme Court, and you said that was illegal?
Yeah, the Constitution of the state of Texas now says that you are supposed to be, 1, a licensed attorney, and 2, you should have been a judge for at least 10 years on some lower court before you can run for the Supreme Court. But I found the 1870 Act of March 30th, 1870 that readmitted Texas back into representation in Congress after the Civil War. And there were people who look at these things are familiar with the Reconstruction Acts. I wouldn't expect many people in your audience to be familiar. But after the Civil War, there were 3 Reconstruction Acts that set the terms for readmitting the former Confederate states essentially back into representation in Congress and the Union.
Mm-hmm.
All right, the Reconstruction Acts are relatively well known. I mean, most people don't, but within certain circles. But what isn't understood is the Act of March 30th, 1870 specified 3 additional criteria for allowing Texas back into representation in Congress. And I don't remember the first 2 anymore, but the third one, and it's 10, 15 years anyway since I've even thought about this, but the third one said that Texas shall never change or amend the state constitution to deprive any of the people of Texas of any of their rights and privileges. And what it meant was any of the rights and privileges as they existed in AD 1870. In 1870,
Mm-hmm.
you didn't have to be a licensed attorney because there were none to run for the Supreme Court. In 1870, you didn't even have to be a judge who had sat on a lower court to run for the Supreme Court. We had the right in 1870. I saw that and I said, well, I looked at it and I said, well, this means that anybody ought to be able to run for the Supreme Court. And I took a shot at it, and I was fortunate that the Libertarian Party, they understood what I was talking about, and they agreed to put me on the ballot as their candidate, and I wound up getting 201,000 votes.
Wow.
I invested maybe $100 in the campaign. I used to tell people if I'd had another $100, I think I could have won. But in any case, for $100, I got 201,000 votes. But it turned heads. People understood that some crazy roofer, and that's what I was doing, was roofing.
You were roofing?
Oh, yeah, I'm a former roofer.
Holy moly, man. That's tough. That's a tough gig.
It's good business. It was tough. In fact, back when I was 45, for what it's worth, my resting pulse was 44 beats per minute. I was still doing roofing. That's world-class athlete at age 44. I guarantee you I was fit. Work in the summer, work in the heat. I was ready to rock and roll back then. Today,
well, you definitely got your vitamin D.
Oh, I got my vitamin D, that's for sure. Today I get my vitamin ice cream, and the world has changed dramatically. I'm no longer ready to rock and roll, but there was a time.
Wow. Tim, you got anything to add? I hate to monopolize.
No, I'm absolutely just fascinated with the story,
Yeah, yeah.
But in listening to the story, it's another one of those stories. It's kind of like a Rocky Balboa movie or something like that, where you get pissed off at all the stuff that the hero has to go through, and just an incredible story, Alfred.
Well, it's one of we were talking during the break and I made the comment, happy people make lousy philosophers. And it's something I've observed and I've understood for, 30 years anyway, maybe 40, I'm not sure. But if you're a happy person and the world is going just fine for it and everything's great, it doesn't cause you to think. People who are living the kind of life that would qualify as the American dream are generally pretty dull, right? They have no reason to do serious thinking. It's only when you get into a condition of stress and discomfort and even pain, at that point in time, you're kind of welcome to your mind. You understand? Now you're going to start to think. It's under the threat of, further pain, further discomfort. That gets people talking to themselves. And next thing you know, you start to think. And the point being, you got to go through some difficult times in order to make advances, intellectual advances. You have to do it. And it just isn't going to happen you just won't get it from a happy life. You will not be inspired by a happy, stable life to do any serious thinking, because what's there to think about? The system's working great. You're getting yours, So the point is, it's unfortunate and it's sad, but we all need to suffer a certain amount before we really begin to think.
So now you suffered a little bit more too after this, right? That's when the Colloidal Silver Company came along and they started trying to fine you.
No, the Colloidal Silver. What happened is the FDA initiated a lawsuit against a husband, wife, and their corporation in 2001. for the man, because under the Controlled Substances Act, the same law you'd be using for heroin, cocaine, methamphetamine.
Unbelievable.
But they came after him because they were manufacturing colloidal silver.
Oh.
They hired an attorney, paid him $160,000. The attorney fees drove them into bankruptcy. The bankruptcy drove them into divorce. They eventually split and left Texas for parts unknown. Before they did, they sold some of their equipment. They didn't sell the business, but they did sell some of their equipment to another man. And he started making colloidal silver, and the government added him and his trust and his corporation as 3 more defendants in this original suit. They added him about 2005. He called and asked if I could help. I said, I don't know, I'll try. It's not something I know about, but I'd take a look. Got involved in it. I volunteered to be fiduciary for his trust. Trust was one of the defendants. I volunteered to be fiduciary so I would have standing to speak in court. Well, surprise, surprise, lo and behold, the Attorney General says, well, welcome to our world, and they made me a defendant.
Oh, my goodness.
Okay, they added me as a defendant, which focuses your thinking. I say you got to go through a certain amount of pain, a certain amount of discomfort. When you're being sued for $25,000 a day, that's $9 million a year. I guarantee you, it will increase your IQ.
I can
it
imagine.
forces you to do a little thinking. I read the relevant drug laws. The case was based on drugs, on a definition of drugs, and in fact, that's what they even say. And for what it's worth, I'll try to. It says the plaintiff's motion for summary judgment dated on or about May 31st, 2006, declared in part definition of drugs persistent to state and federal health codes. And they say this is the key to the case, the definition of drug. And this is from the Attorney General. I have it here in front of me. This is him talking, not me. The Assistant Attorney General, Raul Noriega, he had drafted the paperwork. And he says the key to the case, determining at law, not as a matter of fact, whether the defendant's colloidal products met the definition of drugs. Then they quote the Texas Health and Safety Code, and they also quote the federal code, which defines drugs. Texas Health and Safety Code, section 431.002, subsection 14, defines drug, means articles recognized in the United States Pharmacopoeia, yada, yada, yada. And it says for the treatment or prevention of disease in man or other animals. And then it goes on, it says other than articles other than food intended to affect the structure or any function of the body of man or other animals. And I saw that and I thought, what the hell? You people are out of your damn minds. You don't even know how to write the first time I saw it. Because if I said a horse or other animals, it makes perfect sense. You understand that animals is a generic class that includes a broad variety of species, and a horse is one of them. I could say a cow or other animals. I could say a dog or other animals. But similarly, when you say man or other animals, they're saying they deem man to be an animal.
Right, they kind of class them together.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Now, the significance of this, I saw it the first time, and I thought they were just crazy. I thought, why, you damn fools, you don't even know how to write. And then I saw it the second time, and I said, no, wait a second. This is big. They deem the people of the United States to be animals. They deem us to be livestock. And I am a student of the Bible, and I understand that at Genesis 1:26 through 28, it says, on the sixth day, God created man in his image and gave man dominion over the animals. As a Jew, as a Christian, and probably even as a Muslim, I don't know anything about the Muslim faith, you can't declare the people to be animals.
You know, folks, it's always good to have somebody with the life experience that Alfred Adask has on the show so he can share it with us and understand some of the things that he's been through, because it does make you think. I mean, I'll tell you, Al, it's a little bit painful to actually hear that you went through all this stuff. I mean,
it wasn't like I said. It was, it may sound crazy, but I believe the good Lord's putting me through this.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I believe he's doing it for a reason, and part of the reason may be just doing programs like this where I can communicate some of this information. There may be somebody out there in the audience that actually needs this information.
Right.
It maybe is going to make a difference in somebody's life, and I may never even see them. But I don't know. I don't know what the good Lord's doing. I mean, I kind of guess at it, and but I think that's the way it feels to me. So
how much, when it came to doing the research for this particular case here, How much research did you actually do to come to that one line? I mean, how far into
it? It wasn't that bad. It wasn't that bad because it was there in the plaintiff's or prosecutor's paperwork. They said it.
Oh.
They said the key to this case is whether we have a drug or not. And then they gave the definition of the drug at the federal definition and the Texas definition of drugs. And I read it and I said, my God, you can't apply that. This is powerful, powerful, powerful information. This is the most important insight I've ever made. The government deems the people to be animals. Do you understand why that's important?
Yeah, absolutely.
Joe and I just ran across that like 2 nights ago, didn't we, Joe, when we were reading some of those statutes and you're questioning the use of animals?
Yes.
The point is, our country started on the presumption that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. That's in the Declaration of Independence, which is still part of the organic law of the United States of America. It's not just an interesting historical document. It is as much the law as the Constitution. And it starts with that premise. With that premise, they elevated all men to the status of sovereigns. If you're a sovereign, I'm a sovereign, the guy across the street is sovereigns, then the government is our public servant. On the other hand, if you are something other than a sovereign, the government is your master.
Right.
If you're an animal, if you're a chattel, if you're a thing, if you're a fiction, if you're anything, the Declaration of Independence says all men, and they mean men and women, but all men, as in the sense of mankind, are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. This is the foundation for American exceptionalism. Prior to the Declaration of Independence, the only sovereign you had in the Western world, the only sovereigns, were the individual kings of England and France and Spain and so on. The reason they were sovereign was because they went through a church ceremony, a coronation, where people put a crown on their head that was intended to emulate the corona you see around the heads of the Christ and the apostles in the medieval paintings. That was the purpose, and it signaled that this guy had the divine right of kings. The king was sovereign because he and he alone got his rights from God. Everyone else was subject because they did not get their rights from God in the monarchies. This was the great distinction between being a sovereign and being a subject. When our country started up, the founders said, hell with that. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men, not just kings, all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. In my opinion, I can't prove it, but in my opinion, the unalienable rights that we get from God correspond to the divine right of kings. They can't be taken away because they're given you by God. This is the foundation for the government being our servant rather than our master. If they can declare us in their drug laws to be nothing but animals, they don't have to worry about treating us as sovereigns. And it's not the only device they use. They've used a bunch of them, a number that I'm aware of. This is the one that rings my bell because the entire war on drugs is based on a definition that presumes the people to be animals. The war on drugs laid the foundation for much of the modern police state. I'll bet half of the work that most cops do in this country involves drug-related crime. It's based on a definition of drugs that presumes the people to be animals. The police state gave us the prison industrial complex. 70% of the people in federal prisons are there on drug-related crimes, and these are all based on a definition of drugs that presumes the people to be animals. And none of this will stand if you make a religious freedom challenge to the definition of drugs. You take all of those institutions down. The whole pharmaceutical industry is based on a definition of drugs that presumes the people to be animals. The American Medical Association and modern medicine is all based on a presumption that the people are nothing but animals. All of this is at stake if somebody gets up and they begin to understand, the people will begin to understand, you can't call us animals. It's a violation of my faith as a Christian. I got Genesis 1:26 through 28 says, on the sixth day, God created man and man alone in his image and gave man dominion over the animals. Insofar as I have dominion over the animals, I can't be an animal. And that means I'm not subject to the definition of drugs that's currently found at the federal and Texas levels. And we found it in 5 other states where we looked. I presume it's this definition of drugs. It's at the federal level, of course, and I presume it's at virtually all of the other 50 states. There might be a couple of exceptions, but I presume that virtually every other state defines drugs to reflect the fact that the people are animals.
That's just
your government.
I know, it's amazing.
It's not just amazing; it's genocide.
It is. It's total genocide, and that's how they try to force vaccines and everything else on you.
Exactly, all of that stuff. I watch these people. The people that are being regulated. You see these stories about milk. They're trying to sell raw milk. Without seeing the paperwork, I'm prepared to bet that a close examination of what's going on there ultimately relies on the definition of drugs. Now, maybe that's true and maybe it's not true in regard to raw milk, but it's absolutely true regarding vaccines. All of this stuff about vaccine freedom, all you got to do is get handy with the Bible and say, look, you can't do that. How are they going to make this fly in front of a jury? How are they going to, you bring me in front of a jury and try to convince the jury that they and their children and their parents and their spouses are nothing but animals.
Yeah.
The government can't deal with it. And that's why when we drafted this defense, ultimately they just dropped the case. And they'd invested at that point 6 years and nearly $500,000 in the case, and they just dropped it. It's too politically explosive to take in front of the public.
Yeah.
So the Attorney General of the state of Texas just disappeared. We haven't heard from him now since 2007.
Wow, fantastic. Well, we're almost out of time. So, and I know you've got your broadcast coming up here at 10 p.m. Central. So, could you give the folks your website, where to listen, and also plug your show? Because, I mean, hey, it's.
I don't want to step on your toes.
Oh, you're not stepping on my toes. It's fine. No, it's okay.
If you're curious, visit my blog. It's Adask, adask.wordpress.com. All right, stop in. We've got a bunch of articles up there, and you can find evidence on this man or other animals. We've got probably a dozen articles written on it. This is important and powerful stuff.
Oh, it's extremely important stuff, especially, like I said, when it comes to vaccine awareness. Also, this latest nutrition thing.
Absolutely.
Same thing. They're trying to tell you what you can and can't eat.
Yeah. Because you're animals. And from their perspective, you're animals. And in fact, for what it's worth, the earliest instance we've found so far is the 1906 Pure Food and Drug Act. They have treated us as animals for over a century. And to the best of my knowledge, I'm certainly the first layman to read the law and understand what it means. And you won't find but a handful of attorneys and people at the top who realize they're operating on presumption you are all a bunch of livestock.
Unbelievable. Well, thank you for coming on the broadcast tonight.
Thank you, Joe.
Al, it was an absolute pleasure, folks. That's Alfred Adask, adask.wordpress.com.
All right, folks, good night.
What a fantastic guest, huh, Tim?
Oh, that's just super. I tell you, what a story.
It is. You just can't make that stuff up. And, this stuff just doesn't happen for no reason. Tim?
Yeah, and he's, totally focused in the right direction. Very nice to see. Some people can get bent, when put in that kind of a situation and then just kind of withdraw. But, he's taken the right approach, He's embraced life and he's going full steam ahead, and yeah, you got to admire that, Quite a guy.
Yep, no, absolutely, my man. It's I always love having him on the show because I can't find the words to say. I want to, but you're just almost like listening to him because it's just heavy.
Yeah, you think about, he's talking about the one guy getting, drug in there for a bounce $20 check.
Yeah.
Like, my gosh, how your life could change for such a whimsical, offense. Unbelievable.
Yeah, whimsical. And then sent to a maximum security prison.
Yeah, was that like level 5? Was that it?
Yeah.
Wow.
All because he didn't get his roof done on time. I mean,
Yeah.
what kind of freedom is that, folks? And I mean, this happened in 2002, 10 years ago. And look at where we are now. You can't tell me there wasn't warning signs then? Unbelievable, folks. Time to wake up, smell the roses, and get to work. Let's repair this republic before we really cannot get it back. Hour number 1 is done. Hour number 2 is on the way. And the next hour, we're going to have YouTuber Smithfix on to talk about Agenda 21 in his hometown. Unbelievable, folks. We'll be right back. This is Freedom Link Radio on the Orion Talk Radio Network.